So we had the book chat. I've had some time to think, and now I'm ready to review John Truby's The Anatomy of Story. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be reviewing John Truby's The Anatomy of Story. Now, you may have been around back then, I'm not sure, but back last May, I said I was gonna start reading writing craft books, and reviewing them on my channel. And the first one I did was Save the Cat Writes a Novel. I will link that in the cards and down below if you wanna check that out. And then after that, my second book was going to be John Truby's The Anatomy of Story. And then I kind of fell off the earth, because you know, the earth is flat. Just kidding. And I just took forever to finish it, so I kind of didn't review any more books. But I'm back at it because I do now have a writing craft book club called Let's Talk Craft. I will link down in the description the video explaining that book club if you aren't already aware of it. So now I really am gonna start reading these books. So my plan for that is, and I'm gonna be reading some additional books that aren't for the book club that I will review as well. But what I'm gonna do for the ones for the book club is we'll have the book chat, and then after I've had some chance to think about what everyone said and what I thought, then I'll still do reviews for people who want to just kind of know the gist, an overall review, maybe if someone's just looking up a review of the book or whatever. But of course, you can always get a fuller understanding of my thoughts on a book if you watch the live chat. So I did do the live chat for the book club for Anatomy of Story. So if you hadn't had a chance to watch that and you want to watch that after this video, I will link that up in the cards. And some of you might not know how linking in the cards work, because I know I didn't for a long time. If you click something that's linked in the cards, it doesn't take you out of this video. It like adds it to the bottom of the video or something, or like a queue. So that way you can click it and watch it later. So that's how that works. So anyway, I did have a live chat where I talked to Lindsay Puckett and my brother Kevin, and then people in the live chat who gave their thoughts. And now that I've had some time to really think about the book after reading it, I want to give you guys my overall review of what I thought. Let's talk about John Truby's The Anatomy of Story. Okay, so I have some notes on my phone just because I don't want to forget any little tidbits. So let me pull those up really quick. I want to first kind of just give an overview. Then I'm going to talk about some pros and some cons, and then overall would I recommend this as a must buy read for writers. I do want to give a caveat before I get into this that I understand that this book was written for screenwriters, right? For screenplays. A lot of writing craft books are geared in that direction towards film. Save the Cat was originally also, until they made Save the Cat Writes a Novel. The reason I chose the book anyway, even though I'm not specifically talking about screenwriting, even though this is, AuthorTube is for anyone who writes, so we can pick books, you know, it doesn't have to be about writing books, it can be about writing scripts or whatever. I chose it because this is one of the #1 most promoted books for writers of anything. It is always recommended, whether you're writing screenplays, books, anything, because it's talking about the anatomy of story. Is the person who wrote it coming from a screenwriting perspective? Of course. Are there examples from that? Of course. I mean, that makes sense. But, and of course, whenever you're reading something that's using examples from another medium, you have to think about that, and I did think about that. But I still wanted to review the book because people talk about it and they push it so much, and I wanted to see what I could glean from it in order to help me writing stories. So that's why we chose that book. Not every book will be screenwriting specific. Some is just about writing stories. Some will be writing about books, period. I will have some later that are specific to writing fantasy or writing science fiction or whatever. I plan to do all kinds of different books on this channel. But the idea is, what can we get from writing craft books, period, across the board as writers about storytelling, okay? So that's the little disclaimer for that. So my overall impression of the book. So first of all, the book is very prescriptive. So what I mean by that is that it is telling you this is how you write an amazing story. You have to do these things or it will not be amazing. That's what he says. They're not like suggestions. And he's not saying every story has to have those things. He's saying every great story does. And if you don't have those things, then it's not a great story. that's a little icky for me. I don't love that about the book. I don't like prescriptive writing. I understand where he's coming from and I see what he's trying to say, but I don't know. I just, you know, we tend to kind of try to steer away from prescriptive writing advice because a lot of times those are coming from, how can I say this delicately? When someone pushes one way of doing things, it's coming from one type of perspective that often is coming from, you know, a typical maybe white, male, Eurocentric. Do you know what I'm trying to say? I'm not saying that's what he's doing per se, but I'm saying that's why we try to stay away from prescriptive, because not everyone approaches storytelling the same way. And a lot of times the reason why the most successful ones out there follow that is because they tend to be the majority of the people who decide what gets made, if that makes sense. I don't want to get into that. I don't want to fall down that wormhole. I'm just trying to say prescriptive is not always the best approach to giving craft advice, in my opinion. So I didn't love that. It's also the tone of it. You guys, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It's douchey, okay? He is very condescending, pedantic, you know, like, the way it comes off made me very defensive. And I don't want to be defensive when I'm reading a craft book, because when someone's telling me and saying to me, like, I'm an idiot, you need to do it my way, my immediate reaction, even if they're right, is like, you're not right. You're not right, and I'm not gonna listen to you. And then I'm just trying to look for holes in your argument, and it takes away. And when I used to teach, I would always tell my students, it doesn't matter if you're saying the smartest, most like beautiful thing. It's in how you tell people it, right? That's what matters. And I just didn't love the tone of the book. It definitely comes from a privileged background where it assumes a certain level of education and access. It reads a little bit more, if you're asking me honestly, like a college textbook. So there's some accessibility issues, I feel like. For example, he assumes everyone who's read it has read Aristotle's Poetics. You know, I've read Aristotle's Poetics, but that's because I went to graduate school, you know, for English. So like, not everyone has that background experience, and you don't have to have that background experience to be a writer or to be successful or whatever. So putting that out there, even if you can continue to understand the book, like I don't think you had to read Poetics to understand the book, but by him presenting that in the beginning, I feel like it comes off as if, to people who haven't read it, maybe, oh, maybe this isn't for me, maybe this isn't accessible to me because I haven't read that thing, or I don't know. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I didn't love that either, okay? So I didn't like that. I also think his idea of what is good or what is the best is a very, again, kind of what I was getting at before, a traditional idea of storytelling, of what's important, it's very, again, I don't want to fall down this rabbit hole. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that, okay? It's like very traditional, literary, capital L, of what is good, what has value, what should be lauded over other things, okay? He also goes on to say, like, you know, that the 3-act structure is too formulaic, yet he provides a formula for writing that takes the 3-act structure and then just adds more formula to it. So it's even more formulaic and does follow basically a 3-act structure. So I didn't quite understand that. I feel like my overview is actually kind of talking a lot about what I didn't like. Just because of overview in general, if I'm being really honest, is I didn't love the book. That doesn't mean I didn't get anything out of it. I think you can always get something out of a craft book. I personally did not love the book. It took me a really long time to get through it. I didn't love it. It was very off-putting, and it felt like I was being mansplained stuff sometimes. I don't know. Again, don't want to get into that, but so my general impression is that the book was really rendered unsuccessful because of delivery, because of how prescriptive, how one-sided, and, you know, so overall in general, my overview of it is, didn't love it, didn't think it was great. And I kind of fundamentally disagreed on even some of his really fundamental points, like believing that your main character needs to be immoral who is doing something that hurts other people. I also think some of my disagreements with some of him has to come down to semantics and what I think is immoral and maybe what he considers immoral or what he's talking about. I did learn that through discussion with Lindsay, who I know really loves the book, and some other people that, like, when I think of immoral, I think of like horrible things. Like I think of like 10 commandments, like killing, cheating, blah, blah, blah. Whereas I don't know, after talking to Lindsay, that maybe I was projecting my own ideas of morality, which I also think is a problem because it's subjective. And he's saying your characters should be immoral, that they should be doing immoral things, and that throughout the book they learn to be how to be a better person. Well, I don't disagree with that. It's the moral stuff I was getting hung up on, but that might have just been me. That might have just been how I was interpreting the word moral and how he was using it. And also things like opponent. Some of those issues that I had, I think may have been just personal on my end of how I was thinking about things, because he also believes like the love interest should always be an opponent, that you need to have like a fake ally, and like there were just like really very specific things that every single one should have, and I just don't know. I agree that like so many follow this, but that's because he's a big voice in film, so of course they're following that. But I don't think you have to have it, and I think that there are ways to be successful, and I think we can change things up. And he says that you have to do it like that, and I think, yeah, maybe Hollywood sets up a standard, but I think that we can break out of that. We can break that glass ceiling and have, and I believe people have, very successful storytelling that don't follow those prescriptions, and are still successful. So actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I really just think my overall view were the things I didn't like. So then you're asking, okay, then should I not read it? I'm not necessarily saying that. I personally didn't work for me, but there were tons of things that I underlined that really got me thinking about specific stuff. So as an overview, do I think it's a great craft book? No, but did I get things out of it? Is it worth thinking about to give you certain perspectives? I did like some of the stuff that he said. I like that thinking more about opponents, about how people are interacting, how he sort of says, and Lindsay I think clarified this a little bit better for me, that your protagonist is going throughout the story and you have opponents who are constantly trying to prevent them from their goal. So he talks a lot about that. I mean, let me see if I wrote down some other, I have a quote here that I really like where he says, stories are really giving the audience a form of knowledge, emotional knowledge, or what used to be known as wisdom, but they do it in a playful, entertaining way. I really like that way of thinking about storytelling. I really love that he says, as opposed to life with writing, like life is I think, therefore I am. He says that for writing, stories are I want, therefore I am. I think that was genius, okay? Because if you're really thinking about your book as a character who wants something and they need to get it at the end, that is the key, I really think, to good storytelling. And I 100% agree. And the way he framed that, sort of repurposing that Shakespearean quote, really worked for me. I just, that for whatever reason, sometimes certain things just stick in the way that they're presented to you, and that one presented to me that way really sticks with me and has really helped me think about my story. He says what you choose to write about is far more important than any decision you make about how you write it. So he's really saying, think about what you're choosing to write about. It's really important. Is it relevant to people? I mean, of course you should write what you want to write, but I think he wants you to, like, when you're thinking about ideas, when you're trying to sift through ideas. I also really love that he encourages spending time with your idea before you start writing it. This is something I've always done, letting it sort of marinate. That's what I call it, you know, stewing around. He says the first technique for finding the gold in an idea is time. Take a lot of time at the beginning of the writing process. He said, I'm not talking about hours or even days. I'm talking about weeks. Don't make the amateurish mistake of getting a hot premise and immediately running off to write scenes. So I really like that advice. I found that really helpful and something to think about. Oh, another tip that he said that I honestly just really hadn't thought about, and I definitely am going to be using it when applying it to my book that I'm working on now is that he says that your character should want something, right? So they have a desire, but that desire should intensify as the book goes on, because if it stays the same, that sort of stasis, that's when it gets kind of boring. And the stakes need to keep getting raised as well. So I really liked that way of sort of thinking about it. So like I said, there are some great things in there that I really got from the book that I think were super helpful and I think will definitely affect my writing in a very positive way. So overall, would I say you must buy this book? Well, I did say that about Save the Cat Writes a Novel, and I stand by that I do think anyone writing a novel, especially young adult, because the writer of that is a young adult writer, so she's kind of coming from that perspective, that one I do. Do I think The Anatomy of Story is a must buy? No. Do I think it would be a good book to read? Yes. I don't think it's a must. Now, who do I think it most appeals to? I think it most appeals to people who are very academically inclined, who think in a very academic, structured way. It is very formulaic, very structured. He really comes down to very specifics of how to plug things in. So if you're looking for that, if you want someone to tell you exactly what to write, where, when for things to happen, what kind of characters you should have, what kinds of villains you should have. I think if you're looking for something very prescriptive, very in-depth, maybe you're new, I would not say it is a, if you're looking at levels, if we're thinking about writing as like school, right? It's not a 101, right? It's not a fundamental. It's more of a 300 level book. But if you're looking for something to really help you structure better, and maybe you felt like Save the Cat Writes a Novel wasn't structured enough, then I think Anatomy of Story is helpful. Script writing, especially if you're trying to make commercial movies that are blockbuster type, I also think it's very helpful. So, do I recommend the book? Sure. Do I think it's a must read? No. Did I get something out of it? Yeah, I did. Do I think others could? Sure, I absolutely do. But I really just think it's the type of person to approach it. If any of that stuff is off-putting to you, then maybe it's not worth it. There's probably some of those ideas he gave you could get in a different book and not have to deal with the dude of him. So overall, you know, I don't remember if I was doing a rating system in the first book. It doesn't really matter. I've only done one book review. So I would say it's like a 3. I think that's what I gave it, like a 3 out of 5. Whereas I would give, say, The Cat Writes a Novel probably a 5. So just to put that in perspective. So yeah, that is my book review on John Truby's The Anatomy of Story. I think the subtitle is like 22 Steps to Becoming a Master Storyteller. So if you want something like that, like 22 actual steps, then definitely check this book out. I will link it down in the description so that you can check it out on Amazon if you want. And also I have linked the live chat where if you want to see us discuss this book in the book club, you can check that out. I'll also put my book club information in the description as well so you can see the next book that we're going to be reading and possibly join us in the future. Alright guys, well thank you so much for listening to my review. Please be sure to give this video a thumbs up even if you disagree with me, because it's a nice thing to do. We're in quarantine. Can a girl just get a thumbs up? Alright guys, if you haven't yet, please be sure to subscribe and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye!